buttons, and just like that, we're good to go, I think, in theory. Well, this is sort of the first field test of the new setup, and I have to tell you, I'm hopeful. I'm real hopeful that this is going to work out and work out well. I have made a few tweaks and changes, and yeah, so maybe I should start there. I think it's probably wisest to start there while all the bits, bells, and whistles load and do all the stuff they're going to do. So my old setup used to be on Streamlabs OBS. And I know, it's not the greatest company in the world, but all the same, I really wanted to use something that, like, was pretty easy for me to do because I'm just one person doing one person stuff. And I wanted to be able to kind of set up some stuff and just let it go and then focus on the work I had to do. And that was fine, well and good. And yeah, I was one of the dopes who paid for stuff because again, it's a business thing. I wanted to do a good job. I wanted to get things set up and working and everything. And I didn't realize how much I was sort of like tying my hands, how much I was losing for all this brilliant automation. I thought, oh yeah, everybody else is just better because they're on a bigger, beefier PC. They're on, all different kinds of other better gear, so they can have all the bells and whistles, and I get very few, if any. And over time, I began to feel quite hamstrung by all the things I couldn't do and all the things I saw other people doing, and I really felt like I needed to grow and I needed to push some things in order to make a difference. So here we are, pushing and growing things and trying to do some different stuff. I have made some sacrifices. I've traded my viewer count little icon for far more complicated stuff. I can't promise everything is working totally perfectly. In fact, I don't know if things are working perfectly. The audio sounds good to me, but there's no guarantee that it's, sounding good on the receiving end because I don't know if anyone's receiving. So if you're over there in chat, because I press this button and I don't entirely get a sense of like who's around. Because I press this button, yeah, and it just sort of presses the button, and I don't know what it does. So, okay. But all the same, it sounds good. Awesome. I'm very glad to hear that. That's wonderful. I should also point out that for the moment, some of the stuff we had before isn't up yet because I haven't figured out how to load it yet. So there's this big ass black space over here on the side next to the giant graphic. That's where the chat's gonna go, but I haven't figured out how to load it yet. So it'll get really clear. Oh, good. Oh, well, that might also be because I sat down and like broke out the good equipment and I'm like practicing all my good broadcasting tips. Thank you. I'll take better audio. That was one of the really big things I wanted to do and produce because we're not quite at a point yet where it's like, hey, let's put a camera on John, but we're coming. We're getting there. But I definitely wanted better audio just in general. So, excuse some of the gaps and the spaces in the system. Like there's some big black spaces on the side. There's some spaces up top. More stuff's getting filled in. Tomorrow, I'm making the rest of the graphics and sticking them up there and playing around with stuff. The tip link, which now hangs out at the bottom, is a totally different link. I know, but this time I'm getting all the money. So feel free to make use of that and or share that with friends and loved ones. And the Twitter badge is new. Like, we're trying, we're growing. So it might be a little awkward tonight, but my goal is to, as always, my goal is to eventually get past all the bumps, bruises, hiccups, and et ceteras and get right to the good stuff. Now, I should point out that one of the big trade-offs I had to make for this setup, there's this isn't going to get simulcast to YouTube. YouTube will get uploaded the next day, and that's primarily a budget concern. It just costs money to multi-stream the way I want, and I can't afford it right now. So, YouTube people, you guys will just have to come hang out on Twitch, I guess. But YouTube stuff goes up the day after, like it used to. I don't mind a manual upload early in the morning. In theory, it'll be done by lunch, and then everybody gets what they want. That kind of can... Oh, also, if you were one of the 4 people who were like, hey, John, use more Twitch stuff, now I get to. Now there are tags and notifications and, in theory, bells and whistles. I hope they work. We'll see. We're in this together. We'll find out together if things work and do stuff. Wednesday, I should point out, for the chat, there's definitely more coming. I actually have multiple buttons and things set up. I'm quite excited. I really hope they work. Tonight's sort of just a trial run for some of this stuff to see if it works at all and or if it freaks me out. But so far, so good. Which sort of leads me to tonight's topic. Getting started. Beginnings. In particular, I want to address a couple points with this, mostly of a technical nature. But since this is sort of my new re-beginning, is that how I want to say? New beginning? What order do I want to put all my stuff in? Since this is basically a version 2.0, I thought it might be a good time, and I'd like to thank, I think it was Daniel who suggested, hey, why don't you go talk about how to start things? Here you go. I'm going to talk about starting things. And I think a really good time to do that, just so that we're clear, is it's always best to talk about beginnings at the endings of other stuff, right? One thing feeds into the next. As NaNoWriMo ends and as the year comes to a close, it's a great time to look at how to start the next week, month, year stronger. I'm not a resolutions guy. I think that's a great way to set yourself up for expectation and disappointment and failure. But I'm always somebody who's looking at a better, productive way to accomplish my goals. Even if that means I gotta bring my goals down and stop saying to myself, hey, maybe I can't talk to 10,000 people at a time. Maybe I need to just aim at 5 and go from there. I don't know. But the idea of beginnings has always sort of been a thing, and I'm pretty good at beginnings, frankly. I'm probably better at beginnings than anything else because there's always that sort of cushion of new excitement. Oh, it's new. I'm excited to do this. I haven't done it yet. It's still novel in some way. It's still exciting and fresh. And I think that goes a long way for a lot of people, for a lot of things. But by and large, I really failed in my first 30 or 40 years of life to really learn how to make the transition into getting better at the middle of things or getting better at finishing things, because there's always less excitement about, oh, you're still doing the thing you're doing, or there's always some kind of sadness with, oh, the thing I'm doing is ending. And I, for a number of reasons, was always hardwired to be way more into the exciting, fun stuff when everybody's happy and nobody's yelling at each other and we can all be good and stuff. So beginnings are good. They're the bestest. Yay! Over and over and over and over. And somehow, some way, this sort of idea of beginnings has somewhat followed me through my jobs. I was always great at day job orientations and trial periods for jobs. And then when sort of the reality of the job sunk in, I became progressively more and more bothered by dumb things and small things, and everything stacked up until eventually I would either sabotage my way out of the job or just walk away. And when I got into writing and publishing way back in the day, it became really, really clear to me that beginnings, as just a concept for lots of things, it's a huge point of contention for people. Oh my God, if you ever get into the advice production side of things, people are going to ask about beginnings more than they ask about anything, which is strange because you'd think they'd ask an awful lot more about development than beginning or ending, but everybody wants strong beginnings. That's the one piece of advice the internet and social media and the hashtag writing community actually get right. Like, yes, you do want strong beginnings. And the wrinkle, the catch in this is that it's not as hard as everybody makes it. You just need to be organized. You just need to be somewhat deliberate. Whether you want to call that being intentional or whether you just want to call that, following a plan, that's up to you. I'm not here to judge that one way or the other, but I think understanding how to begin certain things most effectively, no matter what it is you're going to write, because the variation between like, oh, I'm writing romance, oh, I'm writing sci-fi, oh, I'm writing fantasy, the overall big picture for how to get them started isn't all that different. Yeah, there might be some particulars, like in your Western, you will have horses most likely, and in your sci-fi, you will probably maybe not have horses. But by and large, everything begins and everything develops up to a certain point, and then it sort of fractals and flowers away into its other constituent pieces. So I've identified 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Sadly, I didn't make graphics for these. I apologize. It didn't occur to me until like 20 minutes ago, oh, I should have made graphics for these. But it's okay. We'll just imagine them in the theater of our minds. I've identified 7 things that writers talk about or ask for help about when it comes to how do I begin this? How do I get started? Where do I start? And I want to kind of try to take this in a biggest picture all the way down to the narrowest picture, only because my other option is to hopscotch all around this, and I don't want to give like disjointed advice. I want to kind of have some kind of through line. Otherwise, it's just going to seem like John's rambling into the microphone again. And as much as I know 1 or 2 of you guys really, really love it when I just go off on a tear, I'm trying to be more organized tonight because it seems like a fine night to try and be more organized. I mean, for fuck's sake, I got new graphics and everything, you guys. Let's try a little harder tonight, John. So, 7 things, how to start them. And we're going to start with the biggest one on my list. Yeah, I'm glad you raised your hand. Thank you for being here. Thanks, everybody, for being here. If you are here at any point in this, just say hi. Because, oh man, I don't know who's here anymore. I lost that widget. I have to make a new one. I haven't learned how. So just hi periodically, and it'll mean the world to me. So we're going to get started with the biggest thing on my list, a series. Because for some reason, actually, that's not true. I know exactly why. I know exactly why every writer wants to come firing out the gate talking about a series. That's because about 10 years ago, there was a real big push in writing circles with new writers and workshops and stuff to say that a series was the best way to get you on the map. There had been the major economic collapse. Publishing had shifted slightly, but the money was still kind of sort of there for a little while longer. And your major conferences nationwide, if not globally as a whole, pushed quite hard for the idea of if you don't have a series, you won't get published, which is patently false. But it was still this idea of you have to have these big ideas. And then when streaming services, really took off, and HBO and Game of Thrones really took off, the idea of being a series as opposed to a single book became sort of this $ pie in the sky thing. Because if you didn't have a series, how are you supposed to get an HBO show? If I don't have a series, how is Amazon going to pick me up for 3 seasons, etc., etc.? And that's all fine, well, and good. But if you really want to write a series, you don't think about it in terms of, I'm writing a thing so that eventually it will be streamed. You write that series on a single book, from a single book at a time. Because, and this is true whether, now just, I'm going to hedge my bets and hedge you off at the pass. If you're about to say, well, yeah, but traditional publishing will give me a contract for X number of books, so I have to. They can always say no. A series is sales dependent. If your second book, third book, fifth book, 20th book, whatever numbereth book it is, doesn't hit the sales line, the amount they want to move, or at the speed they want to move it, they have no obligation to continue. They can just go, yeah, this isn't working out, we're cutting ties. Likewise, if you're going to go the other way and go, yeah, well, I'll just self-publish. That's cool. I'm all for self-publication. That would be fantastic for you. But if nobody buys the book, why are you going to go through the trouble and frustration of producing 4 more? I mean, yeah, I guess you could promise yourself, well, after I write all 4, I can market all 4. Man, if you're having trouble marketing the first one, what you think you're suddenly going to magically get better doing 3 more the same way? Every series should be treated as individual books that just so kind of happen to involve similar stuff. Whether there's a same character running all the way through, or there's parts of a story that weave together into a greater plot that stretch across multiple books. Notice I said part. We're going to get there in a minute. But each book, in theory, could be read by a reader at any time. Just because you're writing them, presumably, in some kind of order, does not mean the reader is going to get them in that order. Way back in the day when you could go to bookstores and they had physical books on shelves, I bought books in series often out of order because the bookstore didn't have the other parts of the series. So I would start reading book 2 and book 3 and book 4, and then I have to go back and get 1, and then I could jump ahead and keep going. You have to assume that the reader isn't going to go out of their way to get book 1. They're going to take whatever they can get depending on how it's marketed to them. Which means if you've decided you're going to follow some of that real brilliant #writing community writing advice that says that you can take a series plot and divide it up into, let's say, thirds and put 1/3 of it in each book and call it a day, you are sadly mistaken. Because if your book, whether it's book 1 of 3 or just book 1 of 1, doesn't have an internal structure specific and limited only to itself, that book is not moving off any shelves. I don't care if you make it the freebie that you throw in into every other digital download you provide. It's not going to work. So when you begin a series, you begin it by organizing a story with its own cover-to-cover plot, specific to that story, specific to that manuscript. If you want to take elements from that story and extrapolate them, draw them out, elaborate on them, do more with them, embellish them, mutate them, whatever you want to call it, and then weave that into subsequent books, great, do that. That's how you're going to transition from book 1 to book 2. But assume that this could all go away tomorrow. There's nothing wrong with thinking that. I'm not saying that to inspire a great deal of anxiety in you. I'm saying that because it's really important that you understand that a series is one book at a time. And if you treat each book like it's the only thing you got to do, and you can put all your focus to it and craft it to its entirety and into its best shape, it's going to go a lot better for you in the long run than if you are trying to cobble together a story idea that must be read across 3 books. You're not going to get it without buying all 5. You're not going to understand everything, whether you call that your great dramatic genius or your plain childish immaturity about storycraft. One book at a time, please, oh please, oh please. So you start a series the same way we would start a book. Now we're going to start to zoom in. We go from series to a single book. Where do we begin a book? All books begin at the organizational level. And if you're about to sit there and go, oh no, I can't. I wait for the alignment of planets and stars, and I wait for the muse to arrive on the 3:30 bus from Pasadena. I strongly encourage you, straight up, to very much consider taking up a different creative art. Flat out. I am no longer interested in feeding the weak delusion that all of a sudden the thing that comes out of your brain, the confluence of brain chemistry and brain electricity, is somehow magically out of your control, even though it's your brain chemistry, and your brain electricity. Your creativity is summonable. Your creativity is infinite within yourself. Yeah, you might have to fuel your body, get some protein, get some iron, get some hydration up in you. But by and large, you turn the switch. You decide when it's go time to write. And all the little blocks, all the little excuses, all the little things you have done to convince yourself otherwise, whether that's stuff you've told yourself or stuff you've allowed other people to tell you, that's just clutter between you and the way you want to go towards the success you want. I've tried most of the day to think about a real nice way to say that, and so far that's the nicest way I can put it to you. If you're going to sit there and make a plaintive excuse that the reason why you can't get off the ground with your story idea is because of the position of a planet several 100 million miles away, that sounds to me an awful lot like more of a I'm looking for an excuse problem, as opposed to the planet that is indifferent to your existence problem. When you start a book, you start an organization. And if you're unwilling to organize, go find something else to do. That said, there is no one best organizational method to do. There are loads of ways to do them. You want to make an Excel spreadsheet? Great. You want to make a big picture with circles and arrows? Great. You want to make a flow chart? Awesome. You want to make an outline? Fantastic. You want to make a bullet point list? Delightful. You want to make an animatic with storyboards? Sure. Whatever floats your boat. The goal at the organizational level is as follows. You need to, I'm going to use the word outline, but I'm not limiting that to just be capital letters and Roman numerals. You need to outline the following things at the organizational level. 1, you're going to need a main character. I can't stress to you how critical it is that you don't make up your main character on the fly. You're going to need a main character. They're going to need something to do, some kind of challenge, some kind of conflict, some kind of issue they have to resolve. They're going to need a set of skills or abilities to make that accomplishment possible. Next, they're going to need some stuff they can't do, some kind of obstacle, some kind of challenge. 4, or I guess that's 5, they're going to need to look a certain way. You're going to need to give them a physical description. Those are the basics in character building. We've covered that in other streams and other videos. If you're looking for those, by the way, because this is your first time here, go jump on the YouTube channel. I'm 90% certain the YouTube command works. We're going to take 10 seconds and test this system out. Just because I know I should have done this earlier, but yeah, there's the link to the YouTube channel. The YouTube command works. First of all, I'm giving myself air horns because I really wasn't sure that was going to work. So good job, me. I did a thing. All right. So back to our topic. When we're building our character, we're going to sync that with sync, as in like SN, I'm coming through super, super clear. Awesome. Awesome. That's probably because I'm using better software, or I've at least like adjusted the microphone better. But I'll take it. I'm super glad that I'm not sounding like a robot or choppy. That's like crazy important to me. Awesome. Love to hear that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We're going to sync, S-I-N-K, our character neck deep at the axis, at the center point of our story, because we want the reader to connect with things. And we don't want to have the reader like ramp up and gain inertia in order to do that connecting. We don't want to give them like this, hey, all you got to do is wait 30 pages and then the story gets good, I swear. Hey, just make it through the first like 5 chapters and then you're either going to be on board or you won't. You don't want to have to make them wade through garbage to get to the good stuff. But that's the wrinkle here at the organizational level. You don't know what the good stuff is. So I'm going to give you a publishing secret. Here's what the good stuff is. Ready? Come here. Come here. Lean in closer. I know I've got better audio now, so I can just whisper like this. Come here. Here's the secret. What stuff really excites you? That's the cool stuff. That's the stuff you start with. If you were reading this book and it was written by somebody else. I couldn't think of a name off the fly. If it was written by insert other person here from another dimension here, what would you want to read? What's cool for you? Really, what's cool for you? And if you're about to jump into that anxious place of like, yeah, but I'm me and no one thinks I'm cool, I swear to you, I think you're cool. I promise. And whatever you think is cool, I guarantee you some reader out there, if you present your idea to them clearly, they're going to think it's cool too. Do not look for a reason to bail on your own creativity when we are in the middle of organizing it. So where do we start this once we build a character? We think about a cool situation, a cool conflict, a challenge, because that challenge is our plot point. It's the conflict at the heart of our story. It's the thing that's going to involve our main character. Can it involve other people? Sure, absolutely. But it's most critical that it lines up with and involves our main character. Because even if our story detours into subplots, we want to make sure that there is one consistent big deal through line that's important to the character, whether that's I have to win the karate tournament and kick the blonde kid in the face, or I have to, score a goal and win the hockey championship, or I have to spell the correct word at the spelling bee, or someone needs to figure out how to stop the big giant space dictator, or one of us has to save the cat from a tree or something. What terrible movie did I watch the other day? Oh, I'm somehow The Rock, and I have to do rock things with the guy from Deadpool and Wonder Woman. Yeah. Whatever your character is, remember how we started when we were talking about character 2 seconds ago? How about they need to have a conflict? That conflict and issue does not need to be the big conflict of the book. It can be. Sometimes it's okay that it is. But they can be two different things. The trick here, when we get started developing them, find a way to put them together. Not merge them into one. This isn't Voltron or anything, or Dragon Ball Z in its later seasons. But find a way to relate them, right? So if we have a main plot where we have to win the summer boat regatta, otherwise our, very attractive girlfriend Demi Moore loses her grandma's house, we have to win the race, and I hate boats as a main character, so maybe my subplot of hating boats forces me to really believe in myself to go win this regatta to help out my Demi Moore girlfriend in the 80s movie. Something like that. Find a way to align, or at least weave together, your character's issue, your conflict there, with a plot, and you will have a much easier time weaving the story together no matter where it goes, because you're basically saying your character arc and your plot have moments of parallel congruence. They work together better. This is also going to help eliminate the idea that your story is moving in one direction and your character is way the hell over there in another time zone, doing completely unrelated things, and then, oh, wait, hang on, I got to get over here and get back to the main plot. By weaving those two elements together to some degree, ideally some kind of Venn diagram overlap. I'm making a physical gesture that does not translate well in space. Imagine like two things sort of overlapping, and you get what I'm saying. Like the MasterCard logo. I don't know, that maybe got away from me, but I think my point is clear. You want to make sure that there's some connectivity between your character plot and your main plot. We're going to make a distinction here for subplots. Like other stuff that involves other characters that aren't the main character. They can go wherever the hell they want because they're secondary characters. They're tangents. They're off-ramps on our highway. I'm going to keep throwing metaphors at you until somebody out there goes, I got you. So all of these plots we develop at the organizational level. We don't make them up on the fly. We're going to make some stuff up on the fly when we sit down to write the words, but we're not at that point in this discussion yet. But for now, we are just fleshing out the ideas. And if you're about to say, well, what if I think my ideas suck? That's legit. Guess what? Write them down anyway. Write them down. Write them down. Just write it all down. The goal for you making a first draft, will be just to get all the idea out. Not judge it, just produce it. We're sort of getting ahead of ourselves there, but we'll come back to that point, so put a pin in it. For now, what we want to kind of look at is, how do we build the plot? Plot is a conflict. Plot is a challenge. Plot is a problem that needs solving. And our character, much like Vanilla Ice, has to solve it while a DJ revolves it. Or something. That kind of development, that kind of conflict, becomes central to the main character because they're the only one who can solve it. And if you're out there going, but hey, wait, I have like 4 main characters because I have this big, giant, complicated plot that's like huge and stuff. And I swear, John, it's a fantasy novel and it's like good, but I have like 45 characters. Oh, okay. We're going to have a moment here, you and me. All right, we're having a moment, you and me. I hate to tell you this. I really do. But if your main characters, your frequent point of view characters, aren't regularly checking into the plot in order to make progress towards it, they are not main characters, and you are fattening up your manuscript for something that is totally worth cutting. It's really okay if you're not going to write the next Game of Thrones. That series isn't even done yet, and I guarantee you can do better. Don't try and bloat this up thinking that it's a fast track to better success, or that it's going to be cooler when so-and-so and such actor play them in the TV show. Don't do that. Think purely about what's going to help craft the best story right now. One of the things that's really important to me, one of the things that's really going to come up definitely on Wednesday, is that I talk to a lot of writers whose idea, what they want to do, their ambition, is far ahead of their technique. I want to do this big thing with this crazy stuff. I want to have like 2 concurrent threaded flashbacks, and I want to have like 3 different point of view with 2 shifts, because they looked up all the jargon and they talk to people and all this stuff. So they've got all the terms. But when you talk about them in terms of craft, like, okay, how far are you? They're going to tell you, oh, well, I'm 10,000 words in and I'm stuck. I want to be some kind of asset for you that helps you close some of the distance, if not entirely close the distance between where you're at and your ambition. But part of that discussion is going to include some parts where I'm going to sit there and go, maybe scale it back right now. Maybe scale it back and simplify it so that you can do a better job. Don't overlook the idea that our end goal is to get this thing published and to get somebody giving us money for it. And it might be easier to facilitate that, to encourage that to happen by creating a better told, simpler, I'm making air quotes, simpler story than a hyper complex story that sort of shows off that you tried real hard. One of the decisions you have to make at the organizational level when you're getting started with this stuff is, why am I writing? Why? Just why? Am I writing because I want to make a ton of money? Oh, well, you are mistaken. There are loads of other things you can write, like ad copy and crappy SEO strong blog posts and erotica that will pay infinitely better. If you're doing this to get published because you want to throw it in your English teacher's face, cool. I understand. I've done this. I'm doing the same thing right now with this microphone. All the same, that's not going to make you super wealthy either. The era of super wealth has, by and large, for the most part, passed us by. Thanks, capitalism. The really critical point, though, is what are you trying to do? Like, what are you trying to do? Where do you want to go? You want to write. Are we doing this because you want somebody to recognize that you're creative? Because I'll do that now for you. Hey, you're really creative. I love what you're doing. Please keep doing it. Okay, we can tick that off. I'll keep saying that every couple hours for you. That's fine. But I've already given you the thing you were after, so what's your next goal? If you're looking at this in terms of, well, I want to be a published author. I want to be able to sell enough books so that I can use the proceeds from those books to pay a bill or buy groceries or quit my day job or whatever. whatever it might be. Ever since I was a small human, I've dreamt of being a writer, or whatever. Understand that that's a long road, like a real long road, and a lot of it's very monotonous, and a lot of it's not glamorous. And the messy stuff like organizing and sorting out your ideas often takes longer and is more detailed than the writing part. And if you're okay with that, awesome. But if you're in this thinking it's going to be a real quick thing because you can just bang this shit out like it's no big deal, you're not going to get to the success you think you should get to. And it will lead to frustration and resentment. And I'm telling you this not just from, hey, it's literally my job to tell you this. I'm telling you this from personal experience. You will end up bitter. You will end up resentful if you think the fast track success you've had in one area is suddenly going to catapult and rocket you forward in another. This is why we spend so much time getting started and organizing. We've got our character. We've got some sense of conflict for our plot. We've got an acceptable, tolerable number of point of view people shaping and framing the number of lenses or the singular lens to give the reader this experience that we want to give them. And now we're going to craft a world. Where do we start with world building? At the simplest level, we start with location, like where your scenes are. This takes place in a kitchen. This takes place in a bedroom. This takes place on a bus. This takes place in an office. That's world building. That's not necessarily the only world building to do, but it's certainly one of the more concrete levels of world building to do. Side note for me when I play this recording back, John, make the chat bigger initially. It goes a lot better. Hang on while I make my chat bigger so I can read this damn thing. There we go. Sorry. I apologize for that short delay. I like being able to read what people are saying. And I'm very glad that you are finding out that organizing is not easy or quick. It shouldn't be. There are going to be parts that are, of course, easier than other parts, but by and large, organizing takes time. Because if you're going to do it right here at this level, it becomes easier to do things at other levels because everything is predicated one atop the other, like a hierarchy or a staircase or a stack of boxes in your closet. One is dependent upon the next. The world building starts off with a list of locations. Where do these scenes take place? That's one level. It's a good level, but it's just one level. We want to expand that out into a couple different areas, primarily those being, how do all these places stitch together? Yeah, they're where our main character lives or where they work. That's a bit elementary. I want to step out one loop further, one rung up the ladder. What are the rules of the world? And what are the similarities and differences that the reader's world has that our story's world has? Why are we doing this? Why does this matter? Well, if we start by generating a list of similarities and differences from the reader's world, we are giving ourselves as writers a sort of toolkit to know what we have to explain versus what we don't. Because if we can shorthand a lot of this to, hey, it's Earth, except in the story, like, I'm adding extra humans and a few new streets to a road, or I'm putting in some buildings that aren't there, or I'm just using magic, but it's New York City or something, but it's still mostly Earth. You are eliminating the need to spend time figuring out how the gravity works or what happens to Newtonian physics. Because if you can just go, it's Earth, but, or it's Earth and, or it's Earth sorta, ... You're making it easy for yourself. There's nothing wrong with that because it's going to get complicated in a minute when we talk about differences. Those differences are the things that you're going to have to explain to the readers somewhere in the text. Like magic, or faith, or pantheons of new deities, or fantasy creatures, or fantasy races of creatures, or continents, or languages, or things that the readers experience on their planet presumably this planet. I didn't mean to make it sound like they live on Mars or something. I mean, like, the reader's experience as a human being reading the book doesn't include those differences. To the best of my knowledge, your average reader who picks your stuff up in a Kindle file or as a PDF somewhere does not go home and consort with elves and cast spells. Maybe they do. I don't know. I mean, maybe they have a D&D campaign. I'm not sure. But the fact remains that those differences you craft in world building become things you're going to have to write and explain in the book. Like, how does magic work? Why do people believe in the things they believe in? Why is society structured the way that it is? It's not just going to be like the big stuff that we would have a CG budget for, like magic. Oh my God, look at all the DaVinci Resolve and Adobe Premiere that our main characters have to use. Or After Effects. But we think about this also in terms of like, well, why is your fantasy society structured the way it is? Why is it still a monarchy? Why has it been a monarchy for thousands of years when typically consolidated power structures often lead to rebellion? Because humans are social animals and we don't deal well with long-term oppression because of power inequality. Those are some things you might want to consider. Maybe kind of, sort of. Not saying you have to have an answer for them, but you should at least consider them. Why is your society, your kingdom, your planet, your continent, your people, your characters, why are they the way they are? If you want to break that down on an individual level, why is your grizzled, stubbled cop the grizzled, stubble cop? All cops are bastards. Like, why is your unlucky in love female protagonist unlucky in love? In part, that's going to reveal character detail, but in part, that's facilitated by world building. Maybe the character is unlucky in love because society has forced on her this idea that she has to put career first and love will just happen along the way, but she has so far been stymied. Although she's climbed up the corporate ladder, she's found nothing but personal heartbreak. That's as much her decision-making process as it is the society of which she is a part. There goes John talking about class again. But all the same, world building helps facilitate plot and character the same way that plot helps facilitate character and world building. The same way that character facilitates plot development and world expansion. Our story triangle feeds all the other points. That's why it's important to organize this stuff out. And whether you do that by an outline or bullet points or post-it notes or circles and arrows or a numbered list or however it is you want to do it so that it makes sense to you, do it. Do it real well. It matters. The important thing here is that it makes sense to you. Your publisher, by the way, isn't really going to give a shit. Especially if you're self-publishing it, no one cares about your outline. I want to address, while we're talking about outlines before we move forward to the next step in this, I want to address the idea, because it's almost December, and this is when this stuff gets trotted out. There's this article, or several articles that get floated across the hashtag writing community, that look at these famous authors and look at their famous books, and here are their notes. Here are their outlines and their little squiggles and doodles and sideways legal pads that they drew in a coffee shop allegedly, or here are their, iPhone snapped notes or whatever. A lot of writers, especially nervous ones who look for a lot of validation, gravitate to those things and marvel. And to be very honest, it's no different than looking at somebody's grocery list. It's just going to make sense to them, and everybody else has to project onto it to some degree before they can decode it. Even if it's numbered, even if it seems like there's a sense to it, a lot of that sense, a lot of that construction is determined by the author. And likewise, just because it worked for them doesn't mean it works for you. Aping, this is I'm speaking as much to me as to you right now. Aping somebody else's style, doing what they did, even if you swear up and down you can do it better. Aping what someone else did does not mean you will get the success they had. I don't care whether we're talking about outlining or marketing or plotting or cover design or sales pricing or whatever. You are on your own journey from where you are to where you want to be. That journey will share a lot of similarities with other people's journeys, but if you think you can hop the track and get to their destination instead of yours, you are sadly mistaken. It's not going to work because your success is yours, developed by your intent and your efforts and your decisions. Yes, it would be great if we all could share the same level of success, but we are, for better or for worse, entirely different people with entirely different skills to entirely different degrees. And if you're the sort of writer who lets that discourage them, this road is going to be tougher for you than most. Just because we're different doesn't automatically mean you're bad. It just means you're different. Again, I'm speaking as much to me as I am to you when I say that. However much outlining you do before you get writing is up to you. I got asked that, when was that? Over the weekend at some point, somebody asked, how much outlining do I need to do before I get writing? And my answer is yes, some. Whether that's make a rough bullet list, whether that's, did my music, okay, I thought the music crapped out. Whether that's make a crude bullet list or detail everything to the nth degree or just do the first 2 points, whatever. You can write at any time, but I'm telling you, it's just going to be easier if you do a little organizing first. Sort of like how when you get ready to cook dinner, you want to make sure you have all your shit out of the fridge now so you don't have to keep running back and forth. Or you want to make sure if you've got to chop things up and get things cooking before you mix things together, you do those pieces first before you just start combining everything, because otherwise it's going to stop and start and feel erratic and maybe not come together the way you want. Better organization up front facilitates better execution later. It really matters. But if that seems like, oh my God, that's so totally super much, you guys, I don't want to do that, I'm impatient, go ahead. Write yourself a quick note, hey, here's my plot, and then just go. But I guarantee you that if you do that, you're eventually going to have to come back and do some of this organizing. But there is no, what's the word I want to use? There's no publishing industry mandated rule that says you have to do X% of development before you get to writing. I can't even think of somebody who would agree to a level. You couldn't get an internal within a company agreement, let alone between different companies. It's up to you. But do some, it's going to make it easier for you. So if that's a series and our organizational model for our book, how do we get writing? Where does the writing go? How do we do this? Well, okay. Here's where things start to get technical this evening. Oh boy. Okay, just a heads up, I'm going to try and do this with a minimum of jargon. If I use a term that you don't know, say so in the chat. Or if you're watching this on YouTube the day after, leave it in a comment and I'll fill it in as best I can. All right, here comes technical stuff. I apologize. This might get a little dry. I'll try and keep it, bouncy and moving. But we're going to go to school now. So hang on. Here we go. Everybody starts with a blank page. What we want to do, no matter our genre, no matter our character, no matter our plot, no matter our conflict, no matter our whatever, what we want to do on that blank page, the first page, is we are doing two things, okay? We are going to make sure we begin to teach the reader how to read our book. We're going to talk about that, don't panic, but we're going to teach the reader how to read our book. And two, we're going to give them something to picture in their heads, okay? So let's start with teach them how to read the book. Okay. I'm again pulling out a ton of jargon because the jargon's going to come later when we get into scene types. How a reader reads your book is a combination of the reading skill they bring, the familiarity with reading they bring, meaning I've read other fantasy novels. I kind of know what to expect. I've been reading since I was a small child. I sort of know how books work, that kind of thing. I've read your other work before. I know how you sound, that kind of thing. But also a combination of how you write. Do you, write long-ass sentences that seem to meander through like 10 fucking clauses before you reach some sort of a point? Do you write really short, terse, like staccato gunfire sentences that lack independent clauses and are barely, over fragments? Do you only write in fragments? Do you write in this sort of like hyper-stylized thing that no one seems to grasp because you haven't quite fathomed that you can't have a hyper-stylized style without first developing a non-hyper-stylized style? How you write, so that's going to be sentence construction and word choice, combined with how you deploy the writing, that's going to be paragraph size, that's going to be amount of dialogue, that's going to be dialogue tag placement, that's going to be where you put your adverbs, all that stuff. How it looks on the page is the easiest umbrella to put all that stuff under. Meets up with what they're expecting and how they think it should go, and the synthesis of those two ideals. So that's the synthesis of production and supposition merge into a thing called readability. Yeah, that's where publishing gets that term from. Readability is where their expectation meets your structure. And when their expectation and your structure align somewhat, you create a readable text, or you score high readability. We want that. That does not mean, I'll say be real clear, it does not mean you have simplified or dumbed down or watered down anything. We're not writing see Dick run, run Dick run, see Jane twerk, twerk Jane twerk, get that money. We're not saying that. I mean, there's a story in there for sure, but it doesn't mean we're writing to the lowest common denominator. It means we are writing with the highest readable clarity. Yes, I made air quotes. Readable clarity is the idea that this is the best sentence I can write at this moment, both in terms of saying what I'm trying to say, but also given my level of experience as a writer, this is the best sentence I got for this moment. Here's where things get a little abstract. Over the course of an entire manuscript, your quality of writing should improve. You will be a better writer at the end of your book than in the beginning of your book. And if you're not sure that's happening, well, that's why somebody like me has a job. It is literally my job to help you not only get better at being a writer from the beginning to the end, but also for you to be able to point out to yourself, hey, I'm getting better at this. And whether you want to track that by making fewer mistakes over time, or you just want to track that by your general level of enjoyment in production, that's up to you. But we are forever seeking clear, readable text. Because clear, readable text with a high readability, is vastly more demonstrably picturable, meaning I can see it in my head. When I talk about, and I've talked about in other streams, you got to put a movie in the other person's head. This is what I'm talking about. The clearer you get your idea across, the easier it is for me, who doesn't know what the hell you're talking about until I read it, the easier it is for me to picture it. How do we guarantee that we picture it? You can't really 100% guarantee it, but you can certainly hedge that bet and do something like it by making sure you're making clear decisions as a writer. You are intentionally choosing, hey, when I start this scene, when I start this paragraph, I want you thinking about this, whatever the this is. The car, the chase, the explosion, the thought, the statement, the way it's said, whatever. The thing you're writing. You've made a clear decision that that's going to be your starting point. So if you have your opening scene in mind, and right now I'm talking entirely about opening scene, first chapter, first page, which is also referred to the 111 element, First page, first scene, first words. 1, 1, 1. Since we're starting there at the very beginning, a lot of people have this idea. I want to start my story here. And bad writing advice over on the #writing community will tell you that this needs to be something that really grabs attention. And a lot of people interpret that to be like, you got to blow some shit up. You know, you got to Michael Bay some shit. And that's an option. It's an option. You can blow things up. You can make a big fight scene. Go ahead. But you just want to grab somebody's attention. And if you think the only way to grab somebody's attention is violence, that says an awful lot about you and how you perceive the world than it does your writing style. You just need something to grab their attention. That could be a way you describe a thing. That could be the thing you choose to describe. That could be a line of dialogue. That could be a description. That could be the choice of how you want the other person to read or view the thing in their mind. Because if I just say picture a car, are you picturing it from the side? Are you picturing it the driver's side door? Are you picturing overhead? Are you behind the car, in front of the car? Constructed vision is the idea of purposely directing reader attention and imagination in a certain way. So that when I say, here's a car, the way I'm picturing it in my head, at a certain degree, at a certain height, angled a certain way, to a certain degree of focus. And that's before we even talk about the kind of car it is. But just knowing that my mental camera shot is set up a certain way and is framing off a certain part of the picture. That helps me know as a writer, okay, this is what I want the reader to picture. So how do I make that clearer to them? Well, I start describing what's there. And I start describing it as though I'm watching it on TV in my big-ass mental movie theater. Constructed, developed ideas feed from one to the other. If you're a client of mine, you've heard me say this a bajillion times. If you're not, maybe this will be new for you. You need to steer the reader's face. You need to direct their eyes to the distance and focus you want. One sentence at a time. Every sentence is a camera. So imagine, instead of holding up your, Red Dragon X or your Komodo K7, K8, you've got the reader's face, right? And you're trying to do that like sort of horse blinders, put it over the sides of the eyes, or you're kind of grabbing them by the cheeks like an ant at a Christmas party. And you are steering their face, not just left and right, not just up and down, but in three-dimensional space, so that you're giving them the distance you want. How close am I getting to this thing? How far away am I getting from this thing? Am I up high? Am I down low? Am I angled to the left or angled to the right? These are all decisions you make when you are framing every shot, every image. And how you frame that is a combination of your word choice and punctuation. Where you put those commas count. Where you put those periods count. You can always make another sentence. You can always find a way to, chain together multiple sentences. It's not like one sentence is limited to one camera shot. You can chain multiple together, but treat every sentence as though it were at least part of something to see on screen. Does that make sense? Is everybody still with me? Because now we're going to talk some grammar. And we're going to bring the grammar into this. I'm going to try and make the grammar fun for everybody. Wish me luck. I'm going to get a mouthful of tea. All right, so we've got these sentences. They're acting like cameras, right? But how do we know? And we know our punctuation is helping affect how the reader perceives our sentences. Do we put a comma? Do we put a semicolon? Do we use a dash? Do we use a colon? Do we use multiple commas? The two tools I want you to think about are a pair of related things. The dependent and independent clause. Yeah, it sounds like it sucks. It doesn't suck. I'm going to make it not suck. If you ever hear a human being say independent clause, I want you to just replace that entire phrase with sentence. Because an independent clause is essentially a sentence unto itself. It doesn't have any extra bells and whistles. If you just capitalize the first letter or the first word, it could be its own sentence. A dependent clause is usually got a comma at the end, or there's a space and a comma before it. So it's either a header, meaning it's at the head of a sentence, and then there's a comma, and then the rest of the sentence, or a tail. It's also sometimes called a trailer, but that's kind of old-fashioned. The tail is comma, space, and then this clause. When a clause, that's a part of a sentence that is itself not a whole sentence, it's a bunch of words that need extra words to like do its job. Also called a phrase, it's the same thing. Or a sentence fragment. They're all the same thing because English appropriated a ton of terms. Thanks, colonialism. Most tails, dependent clauses that tack at the end, are modifying something. Now, modifying is a loaded phrase, or a loaded concept, I should say. Because modifying doesn't only mean coloring. It also means expanding and changing. So I can modify by embellishing, giving you more detail. The chair, comma, tall and majestic as it was. I've just now suddenly made the chair tall and majestic. Or I can clarify the chair, the third one from the left. I can subordinate the chair, not the broken one. Say what it isn't. I can color. I can do a variety of modifications via the clause to impact the thing before the comma. Remember, this is comma space clause. So it modifies whatever's coming before that comma. That thing before the comma, 99% of the time, is either going to be a noun or a verb. And if it's a noun, that modifier is a noun phrase. And if it's a verb phrase. Why does that matter? One, you are now able to pass the first semester of a master's level writing class. Good job, you guys. Two, the movement and flow you get between noun phrases and verb phrases facilitates tempo. Tempo is the speed at which a reader reads. High readability plus high tempo means the reader's moving through those pages. They're turning them and can't wait. They need more. They just keep reading. They're not speed reading. They're not shortcutting, but they're deeply engrossed and they keep reading. This is the state we want to get them in. Tempo up, readability up, which means you're going to need to use all your tools of grammar plus the decisions you make to create effective imagery the other person, the reader, can imagine. So when you're thinking about, well, where do I get started? Should I really write those 5 pages about the history of this kingdom? Okay, sure. How are you going to create it so that there's a picture in the reader's head? The first question, by the way, if you're thinking about doing like a real, what I refer to as a traffic and weather setup, because you're going to give us stuff that isn't character, you're going to give us stuff that isn't necessarily action. The thing for you to first think about before the words hit the page in whatever structure, do you have a clear picture in your head? Is this a montage of various just old white bearded British kings sitting on thrones? And then we show the passage of time because trees lose leaves and then different kids grow up to be knights, etc., etc. Like, what's the picture in your head and how can you relate that to someone else? Fun fact, important fact, critical fact. The picture in your head does not need to be 1000% completely reduplicated in someone else's brain every time. You have to be okay with the other person, the reader, not entirely getting, grasping, understanding, picturing, fathoming, giving a shit about whatever it is you're writing. Why? Because they're another person. And they are free to think about whatever the fuck they want to whatever degree they want, anytime they want. You have to be okay with them not caring as much as you care. That doesn't mean they're going to care 0 and you're going to care 100. It just means that if you say it's a brown dining room table chair, they might not picture the legs being tapered the way you think they should be tapered. I talk to a lot of writers who get real hung up on that. And they decide that how they're going to ensure the reader really grasps everything is they're going to describe the living snot out of everything. And what that's going to do is extend sentence length, create more noun phrases and verb phrases overall, which isn't necessarily going to create tempo because it's going to be more dependent clauses than independent clauses. It's going to slow tempo, which is going to slow down readability, and it's going to make the story feel more dense. Does everybody see how we get density from over detail based on that description? That's the part where we go to school. Because now we're going to go back and talk about different writing theory. But you got to know this basics. You got to know this sort of foundational idea that the reader's trying to picture a thing. And they're not necessarily aiming for 100% recall. They're aiming for like the 90-ish percentile. And you should let them aim for the 90-ish percentile because you have a whole lot of stuff to give them. And there's no test at the end of your book, so they don't need perfect regurgitory detail. I had a professor once describe that as, lighten up, Francis, it's just a story. Don't get hung up on your detail. Which I think is still a really accurate way of describing it. Lovely. Here we go. On we march. So, if we know this basic structure for reading, and we know this basic idea as to how somebody is going to engage with it, we want to put a movie in their head. What are the tools? What kind of scenes can we craft? Well, one of the organizational things that might help you is a scene list. And a scene list is exactly what it says it is. It's a list of scenes. And whether you want to add extra bells and whistles, that's up to you, and we can certainly talk about them. And I'm pretty sure there's still a video about scenes on the YouTube channel that does get into more detail about them. But by and large, a scene list starts off as just a numbered list of scenes. 1 to however many number. And just, we start here. The scene 1, we start in the garage. Scene 2, the guy drives to work. Scene 3, there's traffic. Scene 4, he arrives at the office. Scene 5, the aliens attack. Whatever. That breakdown of scenes, which more or less functions as a loose outline, can help us because we can further subdivide these scenes. And knowing scene construction can make a huge difference in terms of getting a chapter started. Because now we're going to get more terms. I can tell, like, some of you are super eager for this, and some of you are, not at all eager for this, but I'm going to try and do this in a fairly clear way. There's something called an open start and a closed start. Yeah, I know. It's already sounding dull. I'm going to try and make it exciting. Think about it this way. An open start is encouraging. Think about open arms for a hug. We are encouraging and letting whatever come at us. Presumably it's another person running towards us in this metaphor, okay? Just so we're clear. We're open to it. Arms wide open, so says the 90s Creed Jesus song, right? A closed start, our arms are crossed. We're not really letting anything in. We're kind of opposed. Think about anybody with their arms crossed and whether or not that's defiant or reserved or held back. What's the difference? Why do we make a difference like this? An open start allows us to pick up tempo. It's a good feed for an action beat because who knows what could happen? We're ready for anything. Our arms are wide open. Whereas something closed, we have a very particular thing on our mind. We're in a mood, we have an opinion, we're maybe grumpy, or we're not really sure what's going to happen, so we're putting our foot down. Think about a person with their arms crossed who's very definitely got a reason why their arms are crossed. People don't by default, unless you're my dad, I guess, walk around with their arms crossed just for no reason. Open starts work best for action beats, discovery beats, investigation beats. Closed starts work great for dialogue and emotional beats. Can there be crossover? Absolutely. You can have a very open dialogue beat. Sure. It's all about, here comes more jargon, developed tonality. Developed tonality is the idea how a character sounds when they speak. It's how the reader hears the character in their head. And I'm not talking about how an audiobook reader like portrays the character or performs the character, whatever verb you want to use. I'm talking about how the reader thinks the character sounds, independent of its performance by another person. So when you hear your main character in your head, maybe they sound like a celebrity. Maybe they don't sound like a celebrity. Maybe they sound like a video game voice actor. Maybe they sound like an anime voice actor. I don't know. Maybe they sound like somebody else. The reader might not necessarily share that casting call. They might not know that your main character should sound like Martin Sheen. I just picked somebody off the top of my head. They might hear your character as Wilford Brimley. Or they might hear your character as insert young actor here because I don't... Timothy Chalamet. I don't know. I'm running out. I don't know the young hip actors, you guys. You can make fun of me for that. But the idea primarily is you can't control how the reader hears the character unless you use a combination of closed beats and open beats to help frame and contextualize the character's tonality. I'm not going to know you're writing essentially Ryan Reynolds with the serial numbers filed off unless you put the character in situations where I can put two and two together as a reader and look at circumstance plus dialogue and go, oh, you're writing Deadpool. Otherwise, I'm not going to know. It might be very clear to you, but you're a writer. It's always clear to you. It's your damn idea. I hope it's clear to you, you know? But it doesn't make me stupid if I don't immediately pick up on it. It's just I'm the reader and I don't know. It's your job to inform me. That's why part of this early start to what we're writing is you're teaching me how to read your book. Part of that teaching is, hey, here's how this character sounds. Expect them to sound this way. They're going to come across this way. They're going to use this number of words. They're going to pause in certain ways. You know how we can tell the difference between like William Shatner and Christopher Walken, that kind of thing. We're going to insert pauses and frame dialogue out this way or that way because I want you to hear the character sound a certain way. Now, some writers don't give a shit about tonality. They just want to have the characters say the line and do the thing. And that's fine. It hopefully won't stay like that for the duration of this manuscript or the duration of their series or the duration of their career, and they will eventually want to develop those tools for their toolbox. But it's okay if you're starting out and you haven't really given any thought as to how the character sounds. You just know this is what they're going to say and then how they're going to move and what they're going to do as a result of saying it. Well, you'll get there. Everybody does eventually. This might just not be your moment, right? So if we're developing one scene after the other, one movement through things after another, every scene has goals and activities and, you know, some have dialogue, some have no dialogue, but there's always movement. There's always progression from scene to scene to scene, and that's what helps tie the story together. How did we get from A to B to B to C to C to D, etc., etc.? Again, all this early stuff is teaching us how to read the story. And that builds all the way through the first act. By the time we get done the first act, the reader should have a handle on how to read the book. They should have a good sense of the character. They should have a good sense of how you're going to develop and describe things in their heads. They should know whether you're going to spend a lot of time on little details and very little on big details, or vice versa. They should have a sense of like whether or not they're going to stick with the book. This is also a really interesting point to note, because the first act ends when the plot really starts to accelerate. So it seems like the reader's decision to keep reading is less connected immediately to your plot's cool factor and more to how well you tell a story. Maybe that's significant. Maybe that's going to come up later. All right, we're taking a temperature check. Everybody good? We're cool? Everybody good? Questions so far? There is more jargon coming. All good. All right. I'm going to press a button now. Open start versus closed. Yes. Could you give some quick examples? Absolutely. Here are some quick examples of open starts versus closed starts. Open starts. We'll do them first because they're a little bit easier. Open starts. First person, just because I'll do my examples in first person because it's easier and faster for me. I never knew what a car fireball looked like. It's open. Why? Because I haven't given you any detail specifically beyond, hey, picture a car on fire with a fireball. We haven't talked distance. We haven't talked height, day, time, temperature, who you are, who I am, what's going on. It's very open. It's very broad. You have a lot of room for projection. You have a lot of anticipation for further detail. Let's do open dialogue. Wow, that sucks. It leads us and requires us to get a second line for context. Because, wow, that sucks doesn't entirely tell us anything. We need to know more. We are open to receiving more detail. Let's do an open emotional beat. Just cuz. Record scratch sound effect. I bet you're wondering how I got here. Because it again requires us to give context going forward. Open starts to things, whether they're scenes or beats or sections or chapters or whatever's. Open things tend to pick up the pace because the thing that immediately follows helps give us a context and usually does something to accelerate things. Whether that's an action beat, the doors fly open. Whether that's a statement, I'm going to kill you on Tuesday, or something like that. Closed starts are usually far more declarative. I should have listened to my mother. Never marry a woman in Reno in 3 a.m. It's really hard to talk when someone's broken your nose. The kingdom of Travelar was once again mired in controversy. There's a little less flexibility in what comes next. There's a little bit more declaration in terms of what the thing is. There's still anticipation. We still want to know more detail, please. But the amount of variation between the detail, our options for what comes next, is slightly more limited. Because the thing we have said, the thing we have started with, is a bit more declarative. There's less wiggle room. If I tell you the kingdom is once again mired in controversy, hopefully the next sentence is going to further establish the existence of the specific controversy, or say more about the kingdom in general. I'm not going to suddenly go from the kingdom is mired in controversy to cheesesteaks with provolone are delicious, because it's just not going to work. Does that make sense? Does that sort of help clarify the difference between open and closed? It's going to help lead the reader forward in some way, shape, or form. That's what we're going for. Good question. Thank you for asking it. Awesome. 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 So we're using our first, I'm going to take a mouthful of tea. Everybody seems cool. I am going to press a button just to see what happens. Just because. I didn't have this button the last time, but I have it now. Oh, right on. Right on. That's cool. I wonder if I can make that a separate window. That's more for me than anybody else, but I'm just going to deal with it. Okay, here we go. So we use our first act break. That's the gap between Act 1 and Act 2 as sort of our benchmark for the reader. And it doesn't matter to me whether we're now talking 20 pages in, 2 pages in, a paragraph in, wherever. We're just using that as sort of the moment where the reader decides to commit or not. Do I keep reading? Do I give up? This is, if we're using, if you're a Patreon supporter, which you can check out over here using, I gotta put a button for this. Oh, the joys of future automation, John. If you're a Patreon person, this is where the 20-minute plot break comes in. Right around the 20-minute mark in most films, that's where your plot kicks off. That's the movement from your first act to your second act. Same is true in a book, although it's not necessarily 20 minutes or 20 pages. It's just, here's where the plot ramps up and kicks off, so we're going to get some stuff. That's the threshold where the reader decides if they want to keep going or not. Seems pretty straightforward. The important thing here is that once they commit to going forward, you need to know how to start ramping up the plot. And I'm going to use the word ramping somewhat deliberately, but I don't want you to hear me say ramping and your brain to think hurrying, because that's not what I'm talking about. This is not a race through the plot. This is just a transitional period from going from 0 to, no plot to some plot. This is not 0 to 60. We're not doing the 11th Fast and Furious movie where we just, want to see how quickly we can press the NOS button with Vin Diesel. We want to try and just start the plot somewhere. So how do we pick where we're going to start? Well, a couple options. Most of the time, we go back to our organization. What's our plot? Where's our conflict? How can we organize the points of our conflict, the details we need the reader and character to know or find out or use in order to go forward? We can't have Indiana Jones suddenly go to Egypt and uncover the Ark without first meeting the 2 weird army guys who tell him that, hey, your old teacher whose daughter you tried to sexually assault knows something about the Ark, and we don't want the Nazis to get the Ark. Go. We can't start off the movie, the big heist film, without first knowing that there's something to steal. And that it will be difficult to steal it, so we have to gather a team. Where you choose to start and transition out of Act 1 into Act 2 makes a substantial difference. Because if you start, here comes the jargon, downward rather than upward, you're going to have to work a little harder to keep the reader engaged. That doesn't mean it's always a bad choice. It's just a specific one. To start downward refers to something called plot trajectory. A downward start is anything that gives the reader an idea, an inkling, a fear, a worry, a concern that the characters are starting off on somewhat of a bad foot or a mistake or in a difficult situation. That could be anything from they go to investigate the body and there's an active shooter, or the minute they ask around for the name they found on the bloody business card, a fight breaks out, or 10 minutes, an hour after the private eye accepts the case, their office is burgled. Start downward puts the character of some kind at a disadvantage. Of some kind. It can be external, meaning it's done to them by somebody else, or it can be internal, something that causes them to have doubt or fear or anxiety because, hell, I don't know if I'm able to win the big spelling bee and get the person I care about to be impressed by me. I don't know if I can ask that other person to the prom. I don't know if I can crane kick the blonde kid at the karate tournament in the face. Downward. The benefit of starting downward, it draws the reader closer to your character. It helps them sympathize, because a reader inherently wants to see a character succeed. This is particularly useful and true in first person because of something called pronoun flexible insertion, which sounds really dirty and isn't. It's the idea that when a reader sees the word I, some part of their brain thinks they're talking about themselves. It's still true in third person. It's just not as big, not as prevalent, not as heavy as in first person. That doesn't make first person better than third person. It just means they're different. But we start downward when we want to connect reader and character better. It's very useful. It's great for action beats. It's great for discovery. It's great for emotion. It's okay in other cases, but it's usually most frequently for there. Pronoun flexible insertion. Maybe I could put that on a t-shirt. Not so much pronoun flexible insertion, just jargon of the night. I'll think about it. Anyway, starting upward takes the focus somewhat off the connection between reader and character and puts the connection on reader and plot. Starting upward means the character gets a significant advantage or gain or benefit, or things don't seem as difficult. Oh, this is going together pretty easily. Cool. That would include finding a clue right away, knowing exactly who to talk to, having a conversation and getting what they want with minimal risk, being able to accomplish a semi-difficult to difficult task. All of those things trend upward, raise our plot trajectory upward because it helps move the plot forward and it gives the character an advantage they wouldn't otherwise have had. Side note, this is also really super helpful when it comes to red herrings, when we're going to try and give the impression that this is starting off really easy, but 10 minutes from now, we're going to make a hard turn and all of a sudden everything's going to come crashing down. That's fine. That's okay. You can do that too. It's just that the difference between starting up and starting down. Why am I getting Yes, did you guys know I'm streaming? I'm getting notifications now that after an hour and 28 minutes, I'm streaming. Thanks, app. Anyway. So our idea overall, when we transition from 1 to 2, do we want to start up? Do we want to start down? And that's not just the first scene of the act. That's literally every scene everywhere. But it becomes more critical starting with the second act because that's where our plot comes into play. And we go through the second act, however long it is, however many scenes it is, up and down and up and down and up, 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 and down, 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 and up. There's no pattern here. It's not like you have to have the same number of ups as downs. It's not bad if you have 22 ups and no downs. It's not, extra tragic and very emo if you have 45 downs and an up. Doesn't matter. They're just different ways of starting scenes. There's just different ways of moving the reader through the story. This is going to lead us to sort of our next big section. The climax. How do we start a climax? Well, we're going to get more jargon because, writing is packed with jargon. Here we go. This one's a little bit boring compared to pronoun flexible insertion, but it's still good jargon. Ready? We can start a climax interested and disinterested. You might also see this as invested and uninvested, or clenching and loose, or because they're all the same thing. I'm trying to think of some of the others. Motivated and unmotivated, focused and spread. It's all the same thing. What this really refers to, and you're going to find these different terms when you start reading like blog articles, journals, and old writing books from like way back in the day written by a white dude who was probably secretly really racist. You're going to find all these different things, but it refers to the idea of when the character reaches the climax of the story, why are they about to do whatever it is they're about to do? Are they invested, meaning they have a personal reason to be there? Oh my God, you've kidnapped my love interest. Meaning they've focused on it. They have a personal stake in things. The more personal the stakes in your climax, the easier it's going to be to start that climax with a focused character, because the character has a reason to be there. When the reason for the character to be in the climax is not so personal, when they are uninvested or less invested, and they're operating not because out of, oh my God, you've kidnapped someone personal to me, but when you're looking at it in terms of, I have to do the right thing because I'm Captain Goddamn America, you're no longer attaching the climax to a specific character want. I have to save my friend. You're attaching it to a character philosophy. That's just who the character is. I got to do the right thing. The difference there, first of all, we haven't even gotten to what the climax is yet, but the difference in how we're kicking the climax off, or more specifically, kicking off the character's relationship to the climax, gives us another chance to either draw the reader closer to character or draw the reader closer to the overall idea of victory. We want to see our beloved action hero rescue her girlfriend in the climax of the story because we care about the character as an individual and we want her to be happy. But at the same time, we also care if the good guy overcomes the villain because Superman is Superman, and it's less about him specifically saving Lois as it is he's being goddamn Superman. There are advantages and disadvantages to either, but it depends on how you want the reader to relate to what's going on. They're still going to follow what's going on because you're about to write a climax, and a climax is all about the maximum amount of risk, danger, stress, fear, anxiety, possible loss, possible gains, challenge, etc., etc. It's going to require the character to gamble. It's going to require the character to reach a crisis and have to take decisive action. You're still going to do all those things. But how we get the reader attached to it so that we're not just reading stuff. We don't ever want the readers to just be reading the story because you're just telling them this person did this person did that, this happened, that happened. That's great when we're little kids. That's fantastic when we're little kids. Hey, what did you play today? Oh, well, this happened and this happened and that happened. That's great when you're like 6 and you're on the floor with our trucks and our Lego guys. It's awesome. But when you're 26 and you're swearing up and down that you're going to be a novelist, you probably want to consider writing in a less elementary style. So how do we invest the reader in our climax? Because even if our climax is, well, they're going to have a lightsaber fight over the lava until, one of them has the high ground, it sounds cool, but now we got to make people care about it, which is why we want to invest or focus or not invest or not focus. There's a question I usually get asked at this point. Hey, John, how long should a climax be? And that's as long as it needs to be. If you want to do it as a whole chapter, great. You want to do it as 2 chapters, great. You want to do it as 1 scene, fantastic. It's as big as it needs to be to contain whatever it is it needs to contain for you to get across whatever it is you need to get across. Compounding this or complicating this is when you have multiple characters. So maybe they're each doing a part. They're over here, group A is doing this, group B is doing this, group C is doing this. They're in 3 different parts. It's happening somewhat concurrently. Maybe they can see each other, communicate with each other. Maybe they can, maybe they can't. Doesn't ultimately matter. But the fact remains that it shakes out to be, we're spreading out the climax. How you want to organize that, it's a constructive editorial decision more so than a narrative one. Your narrative one was already made when you decided to split people into groups. Everybody with me still? Because we're about to move from climax to resolution. I'm using 3-act structure here. If you're doing 5-act structure, just imagine I've repeated myself for 10 minutes. All right. I'm going to press this button again to see if this changed. I'm pretty pleased. That's pretty great. That's deeply satisfying. All right, resolution. Here we go. Resolution. What's resolution? How do we start a resolution? Okay. Let's first debunk one of the great pieces of writing advice in the hashtag writing community, because this gets said a lot and it irritates me every time it gets said. The resolution is, according to them, the stuff that happens after the climax. No. Resolution begins in the sentence after the character has made a decision or taken an action that tips the balance of story in their favor. I'll say that again. Your resolution starts once the climax has started to tilt in favor of the protagonist or the antagonist. When the scale is tipped favorably to one side more than the other, because the good guy's either going to win or the bad guy's going to win in the end. Once you hit that tipping point, and we're going to talk about the tipping point in a little bit of detail going forward, but once you hit that tipping point, everything thereafter is resolution. Because we've reached the peak, and the only place to go is down. Think about a roller coaster. We hit that real high point. Where else are we going to go? We got to go down. So when the balance shifts in a climax and everything moves to resolution, what do we call that? Technically, that is your crisis conflict point. Your crisis conflict point is the moment where your character has no other choice but to take action. Presumably, it's predicated by a decision, and whether or not the decision is known to the reader, apparent, or overt, or unknown to the reader, covert, unknown, invisible. The fact remains that once the character takes an action, the reader can sort of reverse engineer and go, well, they must have decided to do that. If our character decides to, if our character, sets up for the crane kick to kick the blonde kid in the face to win the karate tournament, clearly they must have made a decision, I'm going to use the crane kick here. If the character has decided they're going to fire the rockets to try to shoot the big giant alien, clearly the decision was to fire the rockets. You don't always need to show the decision to demonstrate the action. Sometimes it's good to skip the decision and go right to the action, because you'll get more emphasis or impact for the reader. There'll be a bigger fuck yeah moment. As in Avengers, when Captain America, we're going along and all of a sudden the hammer comes flying and it strikes Thanos. There's no moment. We didn't see Captain America's start of the action where he stretched out his hand and summoned the hammer. We just see the hammer respond. We see the effect and have to reverse engineer the cause. And when we do that, we feel a tremendous sense of satisfaction because our guess for the cause proved to be right. So, if you're able to show an effect, sometimes knowing the effect and letting us guess on the cause can bring greater reader satisfaction. We move all the way through the resolution. basically following the consequences of that crisis point. We hack off Hayden Christensen's leg and an arm, and he slides down the rock into the lava, and he starts screaming about how much he hates us when we scream that he was like a brother to us and he loves us. And then we walk away sad and dirty and then get on a ship with Natalie Portman. Everything thereafter is consequence. And the ramifications of, oh my God, what did I just do? What happens next? Oh no, oh no, oh no, is at least visually conveyed by, Ewan McGregor putting his head in his hands. But since we just can't say character put his head in his hands, we have a responsibility to fill in more of those detail gaps. When you have consequences to deploy, put on the page, we're going to go back to something we talked about earlier. This is where your dependent clauses come in. This is where your headers and your tails come in. This is where your description of things and treating every sentence like a camera comes in. And sometimes where the camera needs to focus is inside a character's head. Not so much to describe he slumped in the chair and put his hand here and tilted his wrist this many degrees, but you got to talk about how a character feels. Above all else, a reader, regardless of genre, regardless of story complexity, regardless of manuscript size, above all else, your reader wants context. They want to know how to piece together all the things you've told them because they want that picture in their head. They want that mental movie. If you deny them that context because you fail to successfully chain together your causes and your effects and your scenes and your beats and all your pieces, and things feel real choppy and janky, like we're missing stuff and it's stuttering, then you're not building effective readability. You don't have a pretty smooth tempo, and your reader's going to feel discouraged and confused, and then that will trickle out in a sales perspective to not lead to a good experience for a reader, and therefore poor reviews and poor sales. Make sense? We go through the resolution all the way through to the end of the book, dealing with the consequences, dealing with what comes next. If we have a series, we have at some point prior to climax left the door open. That doesn't mean we've stopped everything. Hello, I'm a person from another place that, if you ever need something, call me. Here's my card 10 pages before the end of the book, because that's too obvious. We don't want to be obvious. We don't want to be children. We want to make it look like we know what the hell we're doing. So you don't suddenly leave the door open in the last, third part of the act. There's no drive up in the third act. There's no random new introduction of new stuff to sort of go, next time we'll have to deal with this Batman sound effect. You want to smooth out that process. Again, this is why we organize things. But if we leave the door open for series, we've done that already. Because first and foremost, this book in our series is a book complete unto itself, that if a reader didn't read any of the other books, or the reader has to wait until you write them, the reader is still satisfied. All right, time to bring this thing home. Time to transition out of the manuscript and into the query. Because I'm going to assume now I have to fast forward ever so slightly, because I'm going to assume we've gone through this whole writing process and development through, let's say, 2 to 5 drafts. Okay? And it's complete, and we've had feedback, and let's go the extra mile and say we've had it edited because we're, trying to be serious about this and do a good job. And we've got all our ducks in a row. And now we're going to traditionally publish it because it's been our dream ever since we were a small human to be exploited by a capitalist system. Or, I don't know, we just dream one day of being published traditionally. Sure. Which means we need to write a query letter. Either to get representation from a pimp/agent, or we need to write straight to a publisher and see if they will take our book. Here's the big part where a lot of writers fall to pieces. because they look at this thing and they freak out, because it was one thing when we were just writing. It was one thing when I was just writing my book and everything was still within the bubbles of the, cover to cover. And it was not really a real thing. It was just something I was doing on the weekends and on the evenings and every Sunday from 3 to 6. And then I do a little bit over here and I do it when the kids went to bed, etc., etc. But all of a sudden, when you have to write a query letter, when you have to suddenly talk about your book as though it's a product that someone can say yes or no to, all of a sudden, things get real dicey for people because it's real. And everybody, at some point or another, says something like this about queries. Queries are really hard. I don't know where to start them. I don't know what to say. This sucks. I hate to tell you this, but you have written things harder than queries. You wrote your first chapter. You wrote your climax. You wrote your book's ending. You wrote that one chapter you're kind of iffy on, but the story needs it because it has to hold together. You've written harder things than the climax, and you've written harder things than I messed that up. You've written harder things than the query, is what I meant to say. All the query does is entice and encourage people to get more information that they can only get by reading the manuscript. The query letter is a setup to something else. It is not a plot summary. It is not the quick and dirty synopsis. It is not designed to tell everything to every degree. It's just enough to provoke and evoke interest and its associated emotions. Some query letter formats will have you do what's called a prelude paragraph, which is pretty much a paragraph where you talk about, hi, I'm writing a query letter. And if you like book 1, book 2, book 3, and book 4 from these 4 other authors, you're going to love my book. My book is a book about stuff. And then you launch into the query proper. A prelude paragraph, first of all, is a lazy novelist's way of drawing attention because it puts all your technically strongest points into like a hyper palatable, obnoxious, overly cheery, vague statement up front. And it's designed so that an allegedly very busy submission reader can skim that paragraph and make a snap judgment decision to probably reject you. Prelude paragraphs are not a great format for queries. So what's a great format for queries? Remember how we started chapter 1? Not so much the specifics, but the method. What's an interesting way you can lead people to care about reading the manuscript? What's an interesting element of story? What's an interesting element of character? What's an interesting element of plot? What's an interesting element of world building? What is one thing you can present from your manuscript that can make somebody go, oh, that's interesting. Tell me more. Now, part of that's going to come down to how you do it. So again, we're right back to word choice and sentence structure. But part of that is also choosing a way to approach your story that somebody else might be interested in. Because if I roll up to you and go, yeah, my story is, it's a fantasy story where there's a big kingdom under threat of invasion, and it's up to like an unknown hero to suddenly like do the heroic thing while the rest of the people sort of fight and buy time before the collapse of everything they know and hold dear. Did I just describe like 75% of the fantasy novels in the last 10 years, or did I just give you a real broad view of Lord of the Rings? You need to pick and choose a thing. You need to pick and choose an element that someone else, upon reading it, can go, oh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about connecting dots like that before. I've never seen a presentation like that. This doesn't mean you have to give yourself an aneurysm trying to predict what someone else will like. You know your story better than anybody else. So you get to pick the thing, the entry point, where your query starts. And then you're going to need to develop and follow it up. Okay, so I hit you with point 1. I need 2 or 3 more points at least to follow up here. So what are some other related to that first thing points I can make? Well, if I start off by talking about how, there's nobody in this kingdom over the age of 35, then I can follow up with how hard it is to be 34. And then I can talk about the sort of struggle the character is going through. 1, 2, 3 points. I can package those together because they're related. Maybe I want to talk about world building. Maybe I want to talk about an action beat. Maybe I want to talk about the villain and the context of things. There's loads of different ways to approach it, but the most important thing, no matter how I choose to query, I need to choose a handful between 2 and 4 points, let's say, that I can naturally fit together through some combination of language or some natural set of causes and effects or consequences or relationships, so that the reader, whomever's reading this, whether it's a pimp or a publisher or somebody else, can sit there and go, yeah, tell me more. Give me more. Okay, cool. I see how this goes together with this. That's cool. More please, more please. And eventually, the only place they can get more is in the manuscript. So that's why we lay out our 2 to 4 points in the top 2/3 of the query, and our final third of the query is stuff like the manuscript's title, the word count, maybe a list of themes the manuscript has, maybe a little bit of information about you. It's your debut novel. You recently won this award. Your mom loves you the best. Everybody's really a big fan of your chocolate chip cookie recipe. You have 2 cats. Whatever. You package yourself and your manuscript up with the query. The query provokes interest. They start off by reading a little bit, called a partial submission, where they make a decision as to whether or not they want more information. And since you've got your manuscript in the best shape it can be relative to where you are at the time, as well as the best help you can get from a professional or 2, your manuscript's in good shape. So your partial goes into a full submission. And then from a full submission, they offer you a contract. Now that's different if we were going to self-publish it, because we skip all that horse shit and we go right to, okay, I've got my book done. It's in the best shape it can be. But now, instead of writing a query, now I got to take those same approaches in querying and turn it into marketing. Because now, instead of just having a publisher or intermediary pimp be excited about my work, ooh, please tell me more. Now the person saying, ooh, please tell me more, is deciding flat out whether or not to buy the book. There's no partial submission here. Maybe depending on their platform, you can give them like a little reading sample. And that's more or less the equivalent of a partial submission. But by and large, most people will go all in or nothing, right? They'll either buy the book or they won't. So you're going to need to use that same sort of approach of tied together relationship points, or tied together causes and effects, or tied together interesting story things in order to develop the idea, hey, you want to pick this book up. You combine that with effective marketing, like a strong back blurb. That's the text that goes on the back of the book that allows you to really make sure the interest level of your reader is provoked, is high. It also demonstrates some of your readability, because remember, high readability, high tempo creates interest. And either way, the book sells or it doesn't. And it doesn't matter if it's part of a series. It doesn't matter if it's your debut. It just matters if the book sells or it doesn't. And if the marketing facilitates those sales, or you get in your own way and you make it harder. And if you make it harder, it happens. That's where, again, you can go talk to some people and get some help and straighten it out. It's fixable. Just remember that your early days of sales, once you sort of really kick things off, your early days of sales are frequently your best. And don't get in the habit of feeling like, 30 days in, you're desperate for that rush from the first 2 days, because it's gone. You can get a different rush. You can move on in a different way. But trying to chase opening day sales deep into a book's half-life often leads to frustration. And from a publishing standpoint, unnecessary expense. But that is probably the content for a different stream altogether. All right. Not a bad first run. It worked out really nicely. Any questions? Because there are somehow still people here, and I'm very thankful for each and every single one of you who hung out and asked questions. And I'm looking at this list, and I'm like, I don't know some of you guys. So if you're new, hi. I probably, depending on when you came in, didn't introduce myself. So allow me at the end of things to introduce myself, because sure, hi, I'm John. I'm literally on the internet giving you the best publishing and writing advice you can't get anywhere else. I'm certain on a subatomic level that I can help you become a better writer. I've been doing this half my life, 22 years. So my job is to help writers tell their stories, help them produce whatever it is they're making. You took 14 pages of notes? Wow. That's more notes than I had. You're very welcome. I'm so glad you liked it. But I'm here every Monday and Wednesday evening, and sometimes I sneak in, some extra. There may be some stuff tomorrow as I play with things. I don't know if I'll stream, but I'll definitely record, mainly because I'm working on setting up buttons and stuff. Would you like a sample for Wednesday? Yeah, let's give you a sample. How about the new intro screen? Ooh. Yeah, I have buttons now and they work. It's pretty awesome. I'm really pleased about those buttons, right? Yeah, they're nice, right? I've been working on this stuff all day. So if you're new, thanks, man. Please consider following. If you really want to support this, feel free to check out and subscribe. It really helps us. If you've got an Amazon Prime, your free once a month Amazon Prime sub literally helps me buy cat food. I'm pretty jazzed about that. If you want to see more streams like this, or you want to suggest more topics, the best thing you can do is jump on the Patreon. I gave the link earlier, patreon.com/JohnHelpsYouCreate. You will absolutely be free to make as many stream suggestions as you want. That's what I got today. This recording will make its way to YouTube tomorrow at some point. I'll probably start the upload at like 6 a.m, and it'll go up whenever it's done, because I've got pre-American holiday stuff to do tomorrow. So yeah, I'm around, but not like super around in the morning. I'll be around in the afternoon for sure. Any questions from new people, longtime friends, subscribers, enemies lurking in chat, mortal nemesises, bosom companions, etc.? I'm still trying to get my head around 14 pages of notes. Oh man, 14 pages of notes. I feel like I should press another button then and give you like another shot, give you like another screen, like the questions from chat screen. Yeah, so it's slowly coming together. There isn't a main screen yet. That's coming tomorrow. I got to sit down and like do that, but we're getting there. Questions, anybody? Else we will get out of here around the 2-hour mark. I try to keep these things around 2 hours. Mainly one, because I've been working and talking all day. So 2 hours is a lot of extra talking at the end of the day. And 2 hours generally for writing advice seems to be a rather dense amount of information. I'd be happy to go longer, not tonight, but if you ever want me to on a Monday or a Wednesday, mainly on Monday. If you want me to go longer, just tell me in advance. I'd be happy to, go 2.5 hours. But ultimately, I think 2 hours is a good saturation point for people. The readability equivalent. Yeah, that's called pacing. Watchability. Well, I appreciate that. It's we're gonna get more watchable. I'm gonna fill in some of these blank spots with graphics. They're gonna be worked on tomorrow. We're gonna see about better incorporating this chat into this part of the screen. There are alerts. They do work. They're new. I made them today. So I look forward to the first person who like follows or cheers or something, because they're all brand new stuff and it's going to be pretty super cool. So yeah, there's that. It's been an absolute pleasure as always to sit here with you. Thanks for checking this out. By the way, I sound better. I can tell you that my internet's been far more consistent. Like I'm able to look at like all the metrics and all the bit rates and all the doodads, and like it's been infinitely better than it ever was with the other software. So it seems like we've made a great choice. It was amazingly stable. Yeah, that's really, I'm pretty pleased with. I'll take amazingly stable. I'm pretty pleased with that. That made me quite happy. Even the ASMR whispering. Oh, all right. You mean where I get like this right up here? Hi. Hey, guess what? You can write a book and be published. Yeah. Somebody asked me that reminds me, somebody asked me in Discord at some point as to whether or not I would just do like an I'll just get up all on the mic like this and talk to you, because apparently I have a really good voice for this sort of thing. I'd be happy to. Like I'd be happy to. I've also been asked if I will like read and record stuff that you can play for your kids to knock them out, because I'm a decent little kid storybook reader. Sure, I'll do that too. You just got to ask. All right, let's get out of here though, because I have more work to do. Mainly, I just got to get stuff ready for tomorrow, and I want to make sure I know how to get out of this stuff. I assume I just press the buttons I pressed to start it. So, yeah. Thank you for being here. The next time I will see you is this Wednesday. Let me grab the date. 2 days from now. So that is Wednesday, November the 24th. At 7 p.m. Eastern. I will be right back here for the last Writer's Chat of November. Thanks for being here. Thanks for enjoying this. I should point out that because it sounds better, the music actually sounds better now. You'll actually hear more of the instruments. Yay! I tried that out earlier. So that'll be fun. I look forward to seeing you on Wednesday, you guys. Thanks for being here. You've literally saved my life yet again. All power to all people. Take care of yourself. Keep writing. Don't give up. And I will talk to you very, very soon. See ya!